Hello everyone, welcome to a new video on the channel. Today we are wrapping up the month of June in my reading journal, and we're also going to be talking about the books I read over June. I normally do this in two separate videos, but for the sake of time, considering I am filming this or editing this on the 8th of July, and also because I didn't read any physical books over the month of June, I thought it'd be just easier to talk about the books that I read while you watch me set up my journal for the last time for June and finishing off all the little bits and pieces that goes into the monthly and yearly tracking. So I read a total of 8 books over June. It is the worst month of the year, but I still think that that number is good considering how much I had going on. If you've been following the channel, you'd know that I've been really hectic of late and not having a lot of time to myself, so this is as good as it gets, and I am thrilled with some of the reads that I had over June. The first read I had was This Time It's Real by Liang. This book is a YA romance. It's set in, I think, Beijing. I know it's in China, and essentially the main character has lived in many places around the world due to her mum's job, and she ends up moving back home. She isn't, her ethnicity isn't 100% Chinese, and she often gets called different things by different races because they can never figure out what she is and where her homeland is, which I found really interesting as a conversation piece in this book, to have that element of racism in a place that she considers home, and also just how she navigated being unable to speak the language as well as others who are fluent, and having that more international background to her ethnicity and experience of growing up. Equally though, she is someone who is quite academic, and she writes an essay about, I think the topic was something along the lines of what happens when someone makes you happy, or who is this person that could make you happy, and she ends up creating a boyfriend in doing that. And while she's created the story, she's just thinking about passing the essay, and it ends up actually going viral online. Everyone wants to know about this amazing guy in her life, and she doesn't have that person. She doesn't have anyone that she's dating, and the main male character is actually a well-known rising young actor, and she asks him to step in as her boyfriend for the sake of all the opportunities that she's getting for her writing from this piece, and in return she'll help him with his studies. I think that was what she needed to help him with, something about getting into college. And I found this story really wholesome. If you watch K-dramas or like the Chinese dramas that also sort of follow that dramatic young love storyline, then this will absolutely be up your alley. I think it was really fun and really heartwarming, and like I said, there was actually quite a few topics in this book for navigation about coming of age and what we do to prevent ourselves from getting hurt, losing friendships and everything like that. It was a very vulnerable time for the main character, and I'm completely blanking on what her name is, but I found this story really wholesome. I read it quite quickly. I had it as an audiobook. I do actually have a physical copy of it now. I got it for my birthday, and I'm just really happy. It's like a warm hug. So if you're into YA romance, I definitely would give this one a go, and I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read was an e-arc, and it was one of the ones that I've been anticipating all year, and thankfully it did not let me down. It is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. Ashley writes really unconventional romances. Her first romance novel was all about falling in love with a dead guy. I know that sounds a bit weird, but essentially the person that she was starting to crush on ends up in an accident, and he turns up on her doorstep when she returns home after her father's death. And at home, her family runs a funeral directory, or the directors of a funeral home, and it's all about her coming to grips with what she left behind when she left her family in this small town, and who she's becoming now, and all that experience. She's trying to write a manuscript. She's also ironically a ghostwriter. I just thought it was so clever and well done. So that's not this book. This book is actually about Clementine, and her aunt unfortunately has passed away, and she has inherited her aunt's very kooky apartment. And whilst her aunt has always told her about the magic in the place, as a child you would just see it as that. It was like a magical experience as a child, but it turns out that the apartment actually can transport you back 7 years at a time. And so when Clementine's having a really rough time in her job as a marketing publisher, like the publisher's marketing executive or something like that, she works in getting publicity to authors. When she's having a hard time with her job, she ends up going home and finding that there is a young man in her house that shouldn't be there, and it starts to click with her that what her aunt had said to her in the past was actually true, and the apartment has some magic. Aside from this little fantastical element to the storyline, I think this is really well done. It indicates the way that she needed to grow as a character and as a person, from start to finish. The Clementine we meet in the beginning is not who we end up with at the end, and I think Poston is really good at emphasizing on character development and healing from wounds that they may have faced in their time. So for Clementine, losing her aunt has actually been quite traumatic for her, because she's someone that she used to do a lot of things with, like traveling, and she also has issues with having like enjoyment in her life because of losing her aunt and because of her monotonous job, and so you will find that the Clementine you meet in the beginning changes, and it's for the better. And the main male character that helps with this change is who she meets in the past, and his name is, I'm going to butcher it, it's I think Ewan or Ewan. I cannot pronounce it, it's Welsh, and so it's spelled I-W-A-N, so I'm so sorry if I'm completely butchering that initial name, but he's really lovely, he's really optimistic, and obviously he's just starting out his own career as a student. He wants to be a chef, and you get to experience this really interesting connection between the two of them and how that affects Clementine in the present when she ends up going back to that timeline. And it was just really fun to watch the whole storyline come together. I highly recommend this if you are looking for something unconventional in your romances. I will be following this author for her next stories. They're just so fantastic. And I gave this 4.5 stars. So the next book that I read was for book club, and it was Blood Scion by Deborah Falaye. Oh, I'm saying that wrong, I know I am. This is book 1 in the same titled series. It is a YA dark fantasy dystopian type story, and I will give this a full warning with two things. One, my personal opinion is that I hated this because of how dark and torturous it is, and I don't read that type of book normally, but for book club I picked it up, and I actually felt quite like if I'd given it a DNF like I wanted to, it would have been a bit more ignorant of me, because this does follow along or is inspired by Nigerian folklore and history, and I feel like that's important for us to navigate when the story is heavily set on that. But also it, like I said, it does need to come with a trigger warning. It is incredibly dark, and I don't recommend this to young people, and I don't recommend this to people who don't enjoy books with a lot of like killing and torment and just needless torment. That really threw me. So this book starts off very quickly. It follows a 15-year-old girl called Sloane, and she has been hiding the fact that she has some magic, and this is set in a world where there are magic wielders that are being hunted off by another portion. What are they? I'm mind blanking. Basically, the storyline follows Sloane, and she ends up being conscripted into a child enforced army. So they take them at 15 and basically strip them of all their willpower, because at that age they're the most impressionable, are they not? And it is very much so kill or be killed. The children are expected to attack themselves, like as in their own teams, to weed out the weaknesses and also take out any threat in their way. And also they are expected to kill these magic wielders, and obviously Sloane is one herself, so she has a lot of conflicting thoughts about this whole atmosphere and the way it is treating children to become their weapons. In a war that's not really theirs to fight to begin with. So there is a level of oppression and colonization. The people in charge, I believe, are quite white, or at least they are, like, the people in power are enforcing these young people into this horrible situation and this regime that's just really like brainwashing, and it's very impacting to read. Knowing that this was something that happened in some way or form in the past, to groups of young people being forced to fight a war for other people. And I found this book really challenging to read because of just how tormenting and torturous it was, and how the girls speak to each other. I find it really challenging because one of the biggest issues with fantasy is that if there's a female character that comes in to be around the main female character, they either become their friend because of a reason, or they are needlessly cruel and call names and instantly without even knowing each other. And this did occur in this group. And also the friendships that were built in this were well done, but also quite hard to navigate. So I do find that this book is very challenging to read, and the general consensus of book club was that it wasn't done well enough to have the impact that the author was looking for. So we actually believe that this used to be a trilogy, and she was told to bring it down into a duology, because the first half has a certain pacing. The second half feels very rushed to try and bring in all this element. I will say it ends on a cliffhanger, and I kind of want to know what happens next, but I won't personally be reading it. I will just ask my friends who are in book club that are planning to read it to let me know what happens. But yeah, very dark and quite torturous to read. The next book I read was another e-arc, and it was My Roommate is a Vampire by Gina Levine. And this follows Cassie. She's really down on her luck, and she's being forced to leave her apartment. So she looks on Craigslist for a new apartment, comes across an absolute steal of a price, and goes to look at the place and chooses to stay even though the guy seems really weird, and it turns out that he is a vampire. The story starts out well enough. I was interested enough in it. I did give this 2.5 stars. I found this book challenging because it essentially could have been without the vampire elements. Going into it, I thought it would be more vampiric. The skills that this vampire have is very odd, and doesn't really have that paranormal flair to it that I was looking for. Essentially, this could have been more a man who has been in like stasis or asleep for 100 years and then comes into the modern world and needs a hand. That would have worked just as well, and if anything would have been a bit better. I also think that the wrapping up of the obstacle at the end was very like, I was not impressed with it at all, and also the ending trope is one that I don't like. So yeah, unfortunately this wasn't for me. If you're looking for a very easy, fun read, this is very quick to get through, like it's very easy to read, and you're not looking for anything to overanalyze or really into vampires that much, because you won't get much vampire action. I highly recommend it. It comes out very soon, if not already out. No, I think it's coming out soon. Yeah, I gave it 2.5 stars. The next book I read was another e-arc, and it was Never a Hero by Vanessa Lynn. And this is book 2 in the Monsters series, and I absolutely loved this. I didn't give it 5 stars like I gave the first book. I did give it 4.5, just because of some actions that happened in the book I felt were a little bit slow, and also one of the characters from book 1 is getting more airtime in the book, or on page time, and I wasn't a fan of him, and I really wanted the other character to be on page a lot more. When he comes, it is perfect. This follows Joan. She found out in book 1 that she is from a family of monsters, and their gift is that they can touch humans, and they steal some of their life force, like a day, maybe a few days, and it helps them travel through time. And Joan, at the end of book 1, decided she was not going to travel this way anymore. So, and a lot happens to make her feel this way. She loses a lot of people that she was close to and built alliances with through an action that she takes, which affects her in book 2. So we start out with her back at school, and she's hoping to just get on with life now that everything has changed back to normal. She's 16, by the way, and this is a very YA toned book, but very well done. And it turns out that her actions have great consequences, and so Joan ends up finding herself back in the monster realm, trying to save herself because she is now a fugitive, and also figure out what she's going to do in this timeline, because things have definitely changed, and she wants to obviously save as many humans and as many monsters as she can. I really liked the conflicting thoughts between right and wrong. Because she is a monster, she can't deny the fact that she is one, so she's not able to just be like, I don't agree with monster law, but at the same time, I do like that she tries to fight for the humans, and has that moral compass of wanting to protect, when so many others around her don't possess that because they have grown up in a different way. I liked the revelations, I liked the pacing, although a little bit slow at times. It left enough room for things to grow, and I really liked the fact that her actions were very teenage based, as in if something upset her, she would be very vocal about it and express why without really knowing the full story, and then have to tone it down when she gets the other opinion from the person she is vocal towards. Things like that were really interesting to me, and I like that this character has a lot of flaws and can learn from them as opposed to just brushing them under the cover. I highly recommend this series. I think it's very well done with the time traveling aspect. It's something that I've not read before, and if you have read Only a Monster, which is book 1, I highly recommend you get your hands on Never a Hero. I will say though, when I finished this book, I instantly wanted book 3, and obviously with this one not even being out yet, we have to wait an entire year, and I'm so frustrated because I just want to know how it ends. I think it is a trilogy. And the next book I read as an audiobook, this is The Reunion by Kayla Olson. It follows Liv, who used to be on one of the sitcoms when she was younger and grew up on it, on a show called Girl on the Verge, and she's now an adult. It's been 20 years after the show premiered, and the cast is invited back to do a reunion special, and she hasn't seen her best friend from that show Ransom since the end of the season that they finished the show on last, because they had a misunderstanding, and so subsequently she has lived her life now without him, and obviously being around him again brings up a lot of feelings that she had been trying to work past. I think this was really well done. What did I give it? I gave it 3.5 stars. It was good enough. In the first half I really did enjoy it. It loses some of its steam towards the end, and it does wrap up well enough, and I did enjoy the romance between Ransom and Liv and the reconnection between the two, but I do feel like it could have done a little bit more to represent some of the themes that it brought up in the storyline. I did like the little between each chapter is like either a podcast or a like a Twitter feed, or a news outlet has represented something about the many characters in this world, like news reporting on things that were happening in their personal life and careers. I did find that interesting to have those little breaks in between each chapter. I just enjoyed this. I don't remember having any major issues with it, or any like moments where I was really into it. It was just really interesting to listen to, and a nice take on famous people and how they connect with people outside of the business and within, and how they have to navigate things like publicity, paparazzi and all that when they're still humans themselves. I did like that aspect to it. I don't really have much to say about that book, just that I enjoyed it. 2 more books to go. The second to last book I read was Bet On It by Jodie Slaughter, and I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. It is a romance between 2 people who have significant anxiety or PTSD elements in their life. Asia ends up meeting Walker in the middle of a grocery store when she's having a panic attack, so she is mortified when she finds out that he is the grandson of an older woman that she plays bingo with each week in her attempts to get out of the house and do something social. She plays bingo every Wednesday, and she obviously forms a connection with Walker, and because he recognizes some of her triggers and or what are they? I have anxiety, so I should know the word. Not triggers, like her habits around her anxiety, because he's had them himself, such as like liking to be in small enclosed spaces, especially a closet. He is able to relate to her and wants to get to know her more, but obviously his PTSD comes from this small township that she lives in, and he doesn't want to stay, so creating anything more than a friendship is off the cards. But they can't deny that they have some sort of chemistry, so they decide to start playing bingo themselves, and if they get a bingo, then the bet, they make a bet, and if they win a game of bingo, then they get to get frisky and have sex. That was the sort of bet that they create. It's a sex pact, I suppose. And I really liked how this was done. I enjoyed the representation of mental health and how it affected them through just meeting new people, making friendships, just going out of the house. I really did enjoy how that all played out. And the romance was really well done. In fact, I remember when the very first sex scene happened, sitting there with my mouth wide open the entire time. I was not prepared for this wholesome world suddenly becoming incredibly spicy. So it's really well done. I picked this one up because one of my favourite authors, Chloe Lisa, recommended it, so I read it and I really enjoyed it. I can't really say anything negative about it. I can't think of why I didn't give it 5 stars, just that it didn't feel like a 5-star read. It was just enjoyable. Perhaps I think it was because the ending was a little bit slow and weak regarding the the final third act breakup and angst stuff, but other than that, I really enjoyed it. And the final book of the month I read was Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This is book 1 in Letters of Enchantment, and I absolutely loved this book. I gave it 4.5 stars, and I also listened to it as an audiobook. So some of the complaints I've known from friends who read it as an ARC or as a physical book have said that the dialogue felt a little bit stilted, and I didn't have that problem because of the audiobook, so my experience might be different. But this follows Iris, and she has the desire to write and be known for her words, and this is a historical fantasy, and it's set in a world with magic, but it's also very subtle magic. Anyway, Iris is working for the local Gazette, and she's trying to get herself the role of becoming like a paid columnist, and she has a rival called Roman Kit, and they're fighting for the same placement. He obviously comes from a background of wealth, and she is struggling with making ends meet, and her brother has conscripted into an army. It's to fight for the gods. That's where the sort of really fantastical elements start to play in. There's this ongoing war, and she hasn't seen her brother for I think 5 months, and starts to write to him on a day that she feels quite desperate to just speak to him. So she writes a letter on her typewriter at home, and then I think she puts it through her wardrobe doors, because that's what she used to do with her grandmother when her grandmother was alive, and she was the one that gave her the typewriter. The typewriter is actually magical and sends her letters to another person, and at first she thinks nothing of it. She thinks maybe the universe is just letting her letters go to her brother Forrest, but then she starts to get replies from a person who first signs off as C, and then signs themselves off as Carver, and they become quite confident for her and help her through some really challenging times. Iris ends up going towards the war efforts because she wants to report on the front lines about what's really happening. Where she lived previously are quite ignorant to the war out, I think it's west, and so she goes to the front lines to try and get that information back to her people so they know what's coming, and this is where the story gets equally interesting and also quite tough, because the war aspect is well done, but also it's a war, and I always find that sort of navigation quite heavy, especially with like soldiers and casualties and all that stuff. So it's very well done, but it is heavy content, and I love the way that the magic and the lore of this world weave into everything that's happening around Iris. And of course she has this excellent banter with Roman, who for some reason follows her, and she gets quite exasperated with him. So yeah, very well done, and I like the connection between the main characters, Roman and Iris, and what happens for them. I'm so excited to read book 2, like you cannot wait for it. So I'm now done with mostly all the setup pages. We're in the second journal now, just filling in all those stats and looking through everything. I did actually make a mistake, and I only noticed it when I was rewatching this video back, and that was the little collage of all the books that I read for June on the stats page. I never put them in order of the order that I read them in, which is normally what I do. I just stuck them in however I had put them in. So that is something that has caught my eye, but I'm going to leave it as is. I have a new video that's going to follow this one as well to share with you all. It is the halfway of the year, or mid-year flip through of 2023 for both journals, and I'll be discussing a little bit more about what's happening with this one, and things that I want to change, things that are working still, and things that I probably won't carry on with later on or next year. So if you're interested in that, please look out for it. I think it'll be out in the next few days. I don't really have a time frame for my video uploading at the moment, and I hope to get back into the swing of things by mid-July / by August, the maximum. But thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I did slow this down for you, so if you liked that, let me know, and I will be back with a new video very soon. Bye everyone, and I hope you have a great day or night where you are.